All right, so our first presenter is Rachel Guffey. She has had a lifelong love of plants inspired by her green-thumbed grandma who always shared plant cuttings with her. She and her husband opened Jungle House in the fall of 2018. I am always excited to learn or to listen to Rachel talk about plants because her enthusiasm is always contagious. Thank you and welcome, Rachel.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming to you live from East Lawrence. I'm outside, so please pardon any background noise that might happen while we're on here. Like Kate said, thank you for the introduction. I'm Rachel. I co-own Jungle House with my husband, Jamie. We're over here in the East Lawrence Arts District. If you aren't familiar with our store, we specialize in houseplants. So we mainly sell plants that live indoors. It's a specialty market that we've been having so much fun exploring in Lawrence. Something about our business is that education is extremely important to us. We try to really focus on that community aspect of it. And so Plant Parenthood is something that we offer once a month on Tuesdays for free. The cool thing about Plant Parenthood that we'll be discussing here today as a class is that it is heavily influenced on the Q&A portion. So if you were to attend multiple of them, you learn something a little bit different each time because it really goes off your questions. So with that being said, I'm going to give my presentation really quickly. I'm going to shoot for 15 minutes. That way we can leave plenty of time for you all to ask your questions. If you have questions specifically about your plants, your house plants, I would love to help you. If you have questions in general about growing house plants, ask away and I'll be happy to help here at the end. So basically the overall, purpose of this course is to leaf you feeling more empowered in your decision to bring home a houseplant and confident in your skills to successfully care for it. You really need to spend time investing and learning in the houseplant that you're bringing home because each one is different and has very different care. Excuse me. And so you'll have to learn the specifics about that plant. There's not a one size fits all plant care regimen that'll really fit. We're going to kick it off with shopping. What are important things to know when you go shopping for houseplants? The first thing you should consider is what kind of plant parent are you, or what kind of plant parent do you think you'll be? For me, I am an overwaterer and an overcarer. So I need to buy plants that can handle a little bit more frequent watering, a little bit more hands-on care. I want to pick it up. I want to talk to it. I want to tell it how much I love it. So I do better with things that are tropical plants. If you were somebody who perhaps might be an underwaterer, you might want to stick a plant in a corner and forget about it. You might consider things that are more like a cactus or a succulent that can just kind of survive for about a month on its own. What level of care are you willing to give the plant? Are you wanting something that you talk to and look at every day? Are you wanting something that you can just kind of leave alone? Do you want to deal with distilled water or rainwater on a plant? These are all things to consider. Most importantly, and what I think dictates what kind of plant you can bring home is what kind of lighting you have in your house. I think that is the most important question to ask yourself. Later on in this meeting, we'll talk about what different directions of lights are as according to houseplants. Pets, do you have pets or young children? If so, some houseplants are pretty toxic, so you might want to stay away from those. Usually the SPCA website is a really great resource for what plants are toxic. I Google it, I put like Calathea SPCA website, and it usually will bring it right up. Travel. Do you travel frequently? And if so, you might consider something that can be left alone for a little while. When you're actually physically in the store and pick up the plant and investigate it. Has it been overwatered or underwatered? Is it dripping and just soaking wet, or is it bone dry? Does it have pests? We'll talk about pests later on. Has it been ignored in a corner? Is it outside? These are all things to consider when you're shopping for it. And when you get the plant home, you want to consider isolating the plant. I always recommend isolating something when you bring it home just for fear it might have a pest or some kind of disease. So I put it a little bit away from the rest of my plants for about a week. Usually in about a week, you can tell if it's got an issue or not. As far as lighting goes, let's discuss that a little bit further. Again, I think this is the most important factor to consider when you're bringing home a houseplant. So we have north, south, east, and west. I consider north light to be pretty medium to low light. So when you're shopping for a plant, you want to look for something that can handle a little bit more shade. A caveat to this is your tree coverage to your house. If you have a lot of trees, all of your windows might be low light. If you don't have very many, all of your windows might be a little brighter light. South facing is the most ideal lighting for houseplants Caveat, sometimes south facing can be a little bit too bright for plants and they'll actually burn. You'll know a plant has burned because it looks like a sunburn, and you'll need to move it back a little bit from that window. But south light's the best for all houseplants. East, you get that really intense morning light, so that's great for things like succulents and cactus. And then west light can be more of your medium, although intense in the evening light. So I put a lot of tropicals near west facing window, and they do great. I think we talked about them all. So north, medium to low. South, bright and direct. Bright and direct is something we say a lot in the houseplant world. It basically means it's bright light, but you're not getting in those intense rays right on the leaves. West and east can be medium to bright, depending on your tree coverage. Water. So we need to talk about both the types of water and actually watering your plant. So the types of water, some plants like calatheas and ferns need purified water. Purified water is distilled water, which you can buy in a jug at the grocery store, reverse osmosis water, or rainwater. If you collect rainwater, all of your houseplants will love it, but some plants in particular prefer that. You usually can tell if your plant needs purified water if the edges get really crispy from watering it with the tap water. In the houseplant world, we talk a lot about doing the finger test. So the finger test is basically you have your plant, you physically put your finger down into the soil. I usually go up to my second knuckle. Your second knuckle is deep enough to tell if that soil is dry down in there pretty far. If it's dry, it's usually time to water. Caveat to that would be your cactus and your succulents. They need to be a little bit more dry. Let's say you think something is underwatered. So underwater, the plant looks really droopy and sad. You go to water it and all the water just runs right off the pot. There's a couple things you can do. One is aerate the soil. Sorry, there's a loud noise. There it goes. One is you can aerate the soil. So you'll want to use like a chopstick or the backside of a fork and just physically gently stab the soil and create little holes. Then when you water it, the water will actually go into those holes. Or my preferred method for an underwatered plant, and I do this with a lot of my cactus and succulents, is I bottom water. So I fill up the sink with 2 or 3 inches of water, and you physically just set the plant down in there and let it soak up water through the drainage holes for 30 to 40 minutes. Then that's my preferred method to water things that are underwatered. If you think something might be overwatered, so the soil is just really dry, really wet, it doesn't seem to dry out, your best bet is to physically pull that plant out of the pot, let that soil set outside of the pot for 24 to 48 hours with the plant, let it dry out, and then repot it. That's a really good method to let things dry out. Soil types. Let's talk about soil types. So pretty much any commercially bought potting soil that you buy is going to be too heavy for your houseplants. A note to this, you never want to buy outdoor like bedding soil for houseplants. It's not very clean. It usually has a lot of bugs and it's far too heavy for houseplants. So you'll want to buy houseplant soil specifically, and you'll still want to amend it depending on the type of plant that you're using. So let's first talk about when you should repot plants. So I prefer to repot plants either right when I buy it or a week or two after I buy it. You typically do not want to leave the plants in the plastic grower pots for too long. They're usually fairly small, and the places that plants are grown usually use pretty cheap potting soil. So you'll want to upgrade to something a little bit nicer, typically that has fertilizer in it. You want to repot again 1 year. So most potting soils run out of nutrients after a year. Also, the plants will get pretty root bound after 1 year and they need a new home. So try after 1 year. Something to amend your potting soils with. So the first thing I want to talk about is perlite. This is perlite. It's this white granular stuff that sometimes people think is styrofoam. I love perlite in soil for tropical plants because it keeps it aerated. It keeps it from getting too tight. And it also keeps those roots nice and breathable down in there. So this is perlite. You can also use orchid bark for aeration. It looks like this. Let's see if you can see that. Orchid bark is nice because it's really chunky, and so it leaves nice big air holes in the soil. Also great for repotting things like orchids. A side note about orchids, orchids are epiphytes, and so epiphytes are a type of plant that grow off the sides of tree trunks or rocks or things like that. So ferns, orchids, they're all epiphytes, and they like a lot of this chunky orchid bark in their potting soil. Charcoal. Charcoal is really nice for anytime you build terrariums. It helps to purify the water. It's also great if you have a plant that's really sensitive to the tap water. You just mix this right in with the soil mix. You can also use it on top. So when you water, the water's kind of going through that charcoal and it helps to filter the water. Then there's Turfus. Turfus kind of looks like gravel. It's a limestone-based product. It's awesome for your cactus, your succulents, to keep that soil mix really sandy and grainy. I also use this on top of a lot of plants. I visually like the way it looks, so I'll just lay it right on top of the potting soil. And then if you've been in a jungle house before, you've probably seen these, the Geo Light Balls or the terracotta balls. What these actually are a hydroponic potting medium. And so people that grow hydroponically will grow right in those leca balls. We use it here mostly as a soil topper. I think they look cute, and so I just put them right on top. You can also use it in the bottom of the pot. So let's say your plant's short and you've got this great big pot. You can fill this area up with the terracotta balls and then plant your plant right on top. That way it fills out the top of the pot. In this section too, we should go ahead and talk about the different types of pots you can buy. So terracotta pots, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, are a non-glazed pot that absorb water. So they're great for your cactus, your succulents, things that want to stay a little bit drier. They can be irritating to use with a lot of tropical plants because they do absorb so much water. You have to end up watering things a lot more often. So I prefer a glazed pot for my tropicals. So it'll retain a little bit more moisture. But, you know, if you like using terracotta and everything, go for it. You just have to water a little bit more often. Let's do a quick note on fertilizer. So fertilizer, you only want to fertilize during growing season, which is April, May to August, September here in Kansas. You don't want to fertilize in the off season very often or at all because it can actually have a bad effect on the plant. The plant isn't using all its nutrients and then you're adding more nutrients. It can make it physically burn. So you want to only fertilize during growing season. There's a lot of different types of fertilizer out there. Higher nitrogen-based fertilizers are good for if you grow anything edible, citrus, blooming plants like jasmine. You'll want to use something with higher nitrogen. And then there's regular all-purpose fertilizer for everything else. There's also cactus and succulent specialty soil, or excuse me, fertilizer that I like. There's also a lot of natural fertilizers out there like worm castings, compost, things like that. With those, you just want to top dress about once a month. So you just put a little scoop right on top of the plant and water after you use them. They're a little bit more gentle, so you can use that all year round. Some accessories that you might need for a successful houseplant growing. I don't use one of these, but I hear a lot of people that like them. They're called a moisture meter. So a moisture meter is a little block and it'll say 0 to 10, 10 being super damp, 0 being dry. And then it has this little metal rod in it and you just stick that right down in the soil and in just a few seconds it'll tell you how damp your plant is. People that grow things like fiddle leaf figs, calatheas, things that are a little more sensitive to water, use these and have a lot of luck. Grow lights. So grow lights are an bulb that you can use in your house. You want to make sure you get a full spectrum bulb. And then it needs to be 6 to 12 inches from the plant. You can't just screw it in your overhead light and then have your plant down here on the floor and think it's going to do very much. It needs to be pretty close. Humidifiers and fans go hand in hand. So humidifiers are awesome to run in your house in the wintertime to keep the plant a little bit happier. However, if you run a humidifier and all that moisture is just falling right on the plant and the soil, that can cause a lot of molding. So you want to make sure to also run a fan, which seems counterintuitive, but that'll keep the moisture going throughout the air and not just falling right on that one plant. And then misters, just a little misty bottle. Sometimes people just use the handheld ones. This is a hot topic in the plant world. So some people think misting your plant's a waste of time. I'm on team mist. If you like to mist your plant and it makes you feel good, you feel like you're raising the humidity, do it. I do it. I think it's kind of fun. Quick note on propagation. This is too difficult to get into at much length because it requires more of a visual teaching. But propagation means to grow more plants from your one plant. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the most common ways that we do it with houseplants are node cuttings and then separation or stem cuttings. The node cuttings you most frequently do on like pothos or devil's ivy. So they're those long binding plants you see in a lot of offices. You have to cut right where there's a little brown kind of growth. That piece goes into the water. So you want to cut right above it and then put that in water and then that'll root in 4 to 6 weeks. Stem or separation to propagate, you just physically pull the plant apart and then separate them into a couple different plants. Some people with the node cuttings put them right into the soil, but you have to keep the soil very damp in order for that to work. So I have better luck in water. Probably one of the most annoying parts of having houseplants is pests. So the most common pests that houseplants get are aphids, mealybugs, spider mites, fungus gnats, and thrips. Spider mites and fungus gnats are the most common in many household environments. Fungus gnats look like fruit flies. They breed in the soil, so it's really imperative to get rid of the soil and think about getting some of that yellow sticky fly paper to get rid of the adults. Spider mites look like a really fine webbing on the plant, usually on the rib, the front rib of the plant. So you'll think maybe I have a spider, but if it's really fine, it's probably spider mites. You can treat this with neem oil spray. Neem oil is an organic product, so it's safe for you to breathe in for your pets and kids. It stinks a little bit, but it dissipates fast. It'll smother the spider mites and get rid of them, and then you have to use a high pressure water to get rid of them. As far as aphids, mealybugs, scales, and thrips goes, skip the neem oil step and go straight to insecticidal soap. It's really important to get rid of them fast because they spread really fast to your other plants. Insecticidal soap will do the deed. It'll just get rid of them quick. So I think that's the best way to get rid of them. Thanks for listening to me just ramble on there. I want to open it up to Q&A if anybody has questions. I think that's the best way to learn about plants, and I'd love to answer those now.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. This was, I learned so much just within the last 15 minutes. It was amazing. So we have a question. So this person has a plant in the walkout basement with north light. It always seems to get a growth on top of the soil. It looks kind of like mold. How does she stop this?
So this is probably from the air being stagnant or too much moisture setting on top of the soil. It could also be in those basements. Sometimes you get a lot of humidity. So I would recommend, first of all, repotting the plant, get it into fresh new soil. And then I would invest in maybe a fan and keep that air moving down there. If it continues to happen, you might think about what kind of potting soil you're using. It seems to me like some potting soil is a little more prone to this, like Miracle Grow. So you might switch up the potting soil that you're using as well.
Awesome. So we've got another question. So, and I apologize to the plant for mispronouncing this. So yes. Okay. So yes. This Schefflera, you said?
Yes.
Good. It's not been rotated in 15 plus years and severely leans toward the light. What options do they have?
So many plants will do this over time. They'll lean towards where the light is. So backing up a little bit, the ways to not have it do this would be to rotate it frequently. So at least once a week or so. But now that you're already there, I would recommend getting it repotted. So you could bring it in when we reopen, which is hopefully next month, and we could help you with it, or I could tell you over social media how to do this. So get it out of the pot. Get fresh new soil down in there. Then look at getting a stake. You can use a lot of different things as a stake. So a stick that you find outside, a piece of wood. We sell those moss-covered stakes here at the shop. So put a stake down in it. And then you'll want to use Velcro tape and just go around the stem and Velcro it to that stake to help it lean back up. And now I would start rotating it about once a week to help keep it from leaning back that way.
Wonderful. Okay, and here's a very important question. Where is Jungle House located?
I should have said that. We're located at 924 Delaware Street. If you're familiar with East Lawrence at all, Decade's usually the landmark that we use to tell people where we're at. We share a patio with Decade. If you aren't familiar with where that's at, we're about a block east of Lawrence Beer Co. and then a block south.
Wonderful. And while we're waiting for more questions, I actually have one. So I've heard of putting coffee grounds on some plants as a fertilizer or something like that. Is that a real thing?
Yeah. So coffee grounds, I think, can definitely serve as a good fertilizer for plants. But I would say research the plant you have first. It's best for plants that prefer a more acidic soil. So like carnivorous plants really like more acidic soil. I think in moderation, if you just use a little bit, it's not going to hurt anything. But I haven't experimented with it enough to really be able to speak to how it would work on all plants.
Okay. All right, I've got a question here. They want to keep a Rex begonia alive. What is your best advice?
Rex begonias can be a little bit difficult indoors because they like a lot of humidity and an interesting amount of light. They don't want it direct, but they want it bright. So we've successfully kept them at the shop near a south-facing window, but not right in the window. Then we keep a humidifier somewhat near it. However, this time of year, it doesn't really need it unless you have AC blowing right near it. And then we water it very frequently, at least once a week. They would love it outside this time of year in bright shade, so like under a tree or under an umbrella. They would love the humidity outside, but you'll need to bring it back in before it starts dropping down below like 60 degrees. And in that case, get it into a bright window and water it frequently. Rex begonias are a little bit tricky to learn to keep because they are sensitive to drying out and overwatering. So you just kind of have to find that medium with them. Something you might do also is consider getting a moisture meter. I think that they're great if you need to be able to tell that happy medium.
And as a follow-up, if they put a glass globe over it, would that help?
Absolutely. So a caveat with glass globe, you can't have it anywhere where it's getting any direct light or it's going to turn into a magnifying glass. So you want to make sure you put it someplace that's not getting any direct light.
Great. And we have another question. So they wanted to put something on a very shaded north port or north patio. Anything with flowers?
Jasmine would be a really great pick for that. We sell like sandback jasmine, I believe is what it's called. And we have it on our north facing patio right here at the shop, and it's been loving it. As far as flowering goes, that's the only thing that I'm super familiar with. Things like annuals, I'm not well spoken on at all. I kind of stick to the houseplant route. So perhaps Pendletons could give you a better suggestion with flowers, maybe some type of hanging begonia that flowers. But I keep at my house, I keep jasmine, palms of different types, love it. And my alocasias love my north porch.
And so if a kid is interested in getting started with plants, what would be a good kid-friendly plant to start with?
So my recommendation would be, it depends on the kid, I guess, is where I should start. So if you think that your child would really want to engage with the plant a lot, water it, care for it, things like this, I would consider getting a philodendron or a vining philodendron like pothos. It's a lot more forgiving with perhaps being maybe a little too overwatered. It also kind of tells you when it needs water. It gets droopy and sad. So if your kid wants to really get in there and learn the plant, maybe philodendrons or pothos. If your kiddo maybe wants something that they can pot and keep in their window and maybe not engage with it a lot, then you could think about a succulent or a cactus. I think the little 2-inch or 3-inch cacti, are a lot more forgiving than the succulents. Succulents, once they get overwatered once, they're kind of irritated. So maybe a little cactus if they want something to kind of just put in their window and enjoy.
As an adult with a kid level of skill when it comes to houseplants, the philodendron, I am team philodendron.
Yes, me too. That's like my go-to starter plant for people because it's so intuitive and it tells you what it needs. So I think that's a good pick.
And they're very fast growing, so.
Yes, so you get a lot of payoff.
Yes. All right. We have time for a couple more questions from the audience if there are any.
I think kind of backtracking to Melissa's question about kid-friendly plants, we've done a couple kid-focused workshops here, especially around spring break right before the whole COVID thing happened. And we had carnivorous plant workshop for kids, and that's a difficult one because the kids get really excited and love them, which is cool. I want to encourage that as much as possible, but carnivorous plants are relatively finicky and you have to have special water, distilled water for them. And so I think that that's an interesting one to teach kids on because you get to teach them about why our water has chemicals like chlorine in it and things like that. So I think that that would be a good one too.
That's really nice. We have a question. So what is your background in horticulture?
I have no background in horticulture other than I'm self-taught. I am passionate about plants. I started learning about plants as a child from my grandma, as Kate said earlier. And then I got really obsessed with houseplants like in 2012. And I mean really obsessed, like I went all in. And I spent a much time learning through books and on the internet. And I taught myself, and then we opened up the store. And let me tell you, that's a real good way to learn about plants when you have 2,000 of them relying on you. So I'm self-taught.
Wonderful. And do you carry big mature plants like jade? This person has no patience to start small, which is understandable.
Sure. We don't typically get in very large jade or succulents because they don't travel well. They tend to break in the box on the way here. Most of our plants come from California or Florida. We do get a ton of mature tropicals, though. Right now, I'm going to pick up the screen and see if you guys can see it at all. Outside our shop, let's go this way. So there's a lot of tropicals that are big out here right now. Palms, fiddly figs, banana trees, things like that. We get a lot of those in mature. So yes, we do carry mature things, but typically not jade.
All right. What is the best seller or one of the few best sellers at Jungle House?
Definitely, it's probably a split between the pothos and the succulents. People really, succulents are just so cute, and so it's hard to really resist it when you see such a cute one. So succulents are up there, and then the pothos, because that's what I always tell people who are starters on to grab. So that's definitely a large part of our clientele are people who've never had houseplants before, and so the pothos is really where it's at with that.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Any other questions from the audience? So do you carry herbs?
We do not carry herbs really. We experimented with that last year, and we just felt like maybe it's a little bit out of our scope. And so I really recommend my herb loving people to go check out Pendleton's. That's where I buy all my herbs, and I think they have a great selection.
And how do you order online?
So you go to our website, which is junglehousegoods.com, goods with an S, and then you'll have pickup or delivery available. Pickup is available 6 days a week. We're getting ready to expand that all to 6 o'clock every day. Right now it's 4 or 6 o'clock depending on the day. As far as delivery goes, we deliver Monday, Wednesday, Friday with a $30 minimum.
All right. And you said you have other workshops that you do?
Yeah, we do a lot of workshops, although with, it not necessarily being super safe to have a lot of people in the store right now, we're doing all of our workshops to go. So on our website, should be a to go workshop tab, and then you can grab one of those workshops to go. It comes with instructions, all of the soil and the plant and pot that you need for that one. Hopefully, again, in the foreseeable future, we can roll out doing some kind of in-person workshops. But as our shop is closed and as, social distancing rules apply, we've put that kind of on hold for now.
Right.
Sorry, backing up though, I do Plant Parenthood the first Tuesday of every month online.
Thank you so much. And speaking of online, where else can they find you besides your website?
So we're most active on Instagram. It's at Jungle House Goods with an S. We're also on Facebook. Instagram seems to be more of a planty community that we use, but I want to keep it easy for everyone to contact us. So we're also on Facebook. That's also Jungle House Goods with an S.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.